In the game of loans, you either win or you learn. Welcome to the game of loans, where fortunes are forged and empires are built. Your hosts, lords of lending and wholesaling, are here to guide you through the realm of real estate and wealth building. Brace yourselves, cash flow is coming.
If I work a 9-to-5 and don't want to leave my job, what's the best way to get into real estate investing?
The best way to get into real estate investing if you work a 9-to-5. Well, I always say that the best and the first investment should be a house that you own for yourself. So if you don't own a house, the best way to be able to get into real estate would be to purchase a house for yourself, right?
Okay.
Now, people are going to say, well, I only have $5,000. There are USDA loans that you can get into that are 100% financing. And right now, sellers are agreeing to add closing costs into the purchase price, right? To help for the closing costs.
And just for, our followers, what is a USDA loan?
A USDA loan is a government loan that you can get in certain geographical areas, right?
More so a tertiary market.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Could be a secondary market, not necessarily tertiary. Okay. But there's places, even like New York, where you can get a USDA loan. But more obviously here, we were in Tennessee.
Sure.
There's more of that around.
More opportunity.
More opportunities for
Definitely.
USDA loan. It's actually very prevalent also in places like Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Very, very. Which is, you would never think,
Yeah.
right? But there are obviously income limitations, right? I don't think you can make over $148,000 or something like that.
I think it depends on location too.
Location, and also I think the income limitation is universal though.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
I thought it was specific geographically.
No, I don't think
No?
on that
Okay.
one. For FHA there is.
Yeah.
But this is different. So you have 100% financing. You could do USDA. If you're a veteran, you can do 100% financing, VA loan. Now, let's say you can't. You're not a veteran and you're not living in a place where you could have a USDA.
Sure.
You could choose to move, go somewhere more affordable, which
Yeah.
isn't bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it multiple times. Or you can try and get these down payment assistance programs, right? Through the FHA. They're rampant. They're all over the fucking place. I mean, I see that all the time. So that 3.5% down, you can get some, assistant with the down payment assistance. You could get grants. There's a lot of creative ways that you could get into a property. So that's a first investment, buy a fucking house for yourself. Now, if you could get a 2, 3, or 4 unit, that's even better. Right? Because let's say you get a 2 unit, you occupy one, you rent out the other one, and it's going to subsidize your payment. Sometimes you're going to be paying less than your fucking rent if you could do that. That's going to enable you to kind of feel out how it's like to be a landlord and see if you like it, right? Now, you get that 2 unit, you can rinse and repeat. You can upgrade, go get another one, rent out the unit you were living in.
I have a recommendation as well. So if you don't have a ton of capital, but you do want to get into it, that's why networking is so important, because you could potentially meet other investors who are looking for capital partners.
Very good, right?
And then you can invest that $10,000, $5,000, whatever it may be. And no, it's not going to be a massive return, but you could potentially double your money, right?
You can.
And then rinse and repeat that way as well. And then eventually do your own project.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, one of the first deals that I bought with 2 of my best friends, right? I mean, back then, homes were a lot cheaper than they are today, but we put up, I think, $3,000 each. We came up with 9 Gs, and we did that first deal together.
Yeah,
which was great, and we were all working 9 to 5, and we were able to pull that off. And like you said, we actually tripled our money.
Yep.
So then we kept doing it. We did like 4 or 5 projects together, and everybody went on their own merry way, doing projects on their own. But that's a great idea. That's a very good idea. Put your money together.
Yep.
Find other people that, I would say if you can, keep it with friends and family first, because you never know if you're going to partner up with
100%.
people that you don't know and how that's going to be, right? But to answer your question, that's the best way. Either buy a primary residence for yourself first, get a 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit, figure out how you're going to, what it's like being a landlord, rinse and repeat, move on. Or like Melissa suggested, pool up your money with other people, hopefully friends and family, so that you can have some substantial down payment or capital together, get into a deal together, double, triple your money that way, and you're on your way. Next one. This question for you. Can I invest with real estate with just $5,000?
And the answer is no, because you're a broke bitch. No, I'm just kidding.
You're kidding.
Absolutely. So it really just depends on the market. So that's why it's so important to go out there, understand what property values look like, also the type of loan, right? But depending on where you are lending, the greater the property value, the greater your down payment is going to be. In markets like Ohio, for example, or Chicago, St. Louis, you could potentially buy an investment property for $50,000, $75,000, right? So, and
probably less. Yeah.
Depending on the area, very possible. I think in Ohio, I just closed on a deal, which is very rare because I only do $1 million deals. But I just closed on a 4-unit that was $75,000. Yeah. And you can imagine the profit on that, right? Your mortgage payments.
You can get an FHA loan on that too.
You can get an FHA loan on that too.
I'm
that
sure
goes back to what we were just talking about.
You could probably even get a down payment assistance on something like that.
So yes, where there's a will, there's a way.
100%.
Now, if you're in Los Angeles and you're saying, I want to buy a property and I have $5,000, that is not going to be an option.
No.
But going back to the question we just answered, partnering up with other individuals so you can increase those funds so that you can have a sufficient down payment.
Yep, I agree. I think that's a great idea.
Next question. Which is better for your property and profit long term? Renting it short term on Airbnb or renting it long term to tenants?
Are you sure you want me to answer this?
Why? Yeah.
Everyone thinks, including you, that I'm against short-term rental. It's not the case. What I always try to tell people is that social media has blown up short-term rentals to a point where these properties are becoming so expensive, right? That outside of short-term rentals, they're not able to, God forbid, if they want to get out of the short-term rental, they're not going to be able to cover the rents with long-term rentals, right? And I always try to tell people that get into a situation where if, God forbid, short-term rentals go away, that investment is still going to make sense, right? Where you're going to be able to survive and debt service with a long-term rental in place, right? What does that mean? It means if my payment turns out to be $3,500, I better fucking make sure that in the long-term rental market there, I'm going to be able to get $3,500 a month from somebody who wants to rent it for 12 or 24 months or whatever the fuck the lease is. And that market is going to make sure that I cover that $3,500 payment with a long-term rental, with a long-term renter. Now, if it can't, me personally, I'm out. I'm not fucking doing the deal. And that's it. And a lot of people are like, oh, but, I can't, blah, 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 and they won't change. Bullshit.
Yeah.
The guys that own these hotels, they're owned by the big boys, right? The Blackstones and the BlackRocks, and these guys have so much fucking money. You're never gonna, you never know. You never know what's gonna happen. I mean, even in a place like Nashville, they're feeling the heat right now. So
totally.
So that's the answer, and I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
So
all right, I'll do the next one.
Next one. How can someone buy a rental property with no credit or low income?
That's a great question. So with no credit, my first answer would be to get a cosigner. So even in private lending, most lenders do require minimum trade lines. So if you've never had a credit card or any type of debt at all, you most likely don't even have a credit score. With that said, if you can get another sponsor, another borrower to co-sign with you, we only need one individual on the loan with a credit score. And the credit requirements are very minimal when it comes to private lending. Now, the next piece of that question is, what about no income? All day, every day, because we don't require income, right? We do not look at individuals' income documentation whatsoever.
Asset-based only.
We are asset-based lenders. What that means exactly is we are underwriting the property, the project itself. So we are not looking at you from an income standpoint. We are looking at the profitability of the project.
That's correct. Correct. So to add on to that, though, is if you're coming to us and you have low income, meaning you don't show that much income, but you better have the assets.
Correct.
Because we're going to require a down payment.
We are looking at liquidity.
Correct.
Yes.
Liquidity we're looking at. And, you're going to have to put down at least 20% when it comes to asset-based lending. All right. Next question.
I'll do it. It's my turn.
Do it.
Okay. Next question. What's the biggest money trap first-time real estate investors fall into?
Okay. First-time real estate investors, the biggest money trap that they fall into is a couple of things. One thing is they're always looking at the highest comps that they could get. Right?
Yep.
And that's a big fucking mistake. No, I'm not saying always.
Versus what's actually comparable to the property.
Correct. Or, still, even if they're looking at the comparable, they're looking at the highest.
Correct.
Right? Because they have a real estate investor or not a real estate investor. They have they have an agent, real estate broker or agent singing in their ear, or they have a wholesaler giving them information. Yep. My recommendation to them always is how I like to do it. I'm always looking at the fucking worst case scenario. Now, if you don't want to be that fucking cynical, look at the middle of the pack, and that's the number you should go at. But look at the lowest one as well to make sure you're not working for free at the end of the day, right? Because what ends up happening is they'll do all the work, they'll do all of this, then they'll sell it at the lowest comp, and they're fucked because they didn't make any money. So they just did it as practice, right? So that's, to me, is the biggest trap. The other thing is, that goes along with that, they'll convince themselves to do it because they're getting emotionally involved in the property. And I tell them, get emotionally involved when it's your primary residence. You're allowed. But don't get emotionally involved in the property. That's a fucking investment.
100%.
And that's what they do. And when they get emotionally involved in that, then they allow themselves to talk themselves into the scenario that we just said.
Yep.
Looking at the highest comp, looking at everything as rosy, and that's not the case. Don't fucking sell yourself into a bad deal.
Yep.
That's all I have to say. Next question.
You.
Can I get a loan for a real estate investment if I have no experience?
So, yes, the answer is yes. You can acquire a property without any experience.
Can you explain to them what types of loans you could qualify for? Though?
Absolutely.
Because obviously, like we talked about before, we get a lot of people that are saying, oh, I want to build a luxury fucking property. Yep. I want to build it from scratch. I have zero experience. Can they do that?
So, not necessarily, but potentially.
Correct.
So, let me explain why. For a first-time investor, that has no experience ever, there are a few requirements. So one, it cannot be a heavy rehab project. Heavy rehab is going to be the total dollar amount of the renovation, or it cannot exceed 50% of the as-is value.
Okay.
So if you are buying a house for $500,000 and you want to have a budget of $300,000, that's not going to work for a first-time investor.
Because it exceeds $250,000, which is 50%.
Well, no, exactly.
Correct.
Exactly, because it exceeds 50% of the current as-is value.
Correct.
Now, let's say, so that's why I said you could potentially get a luxury property, right? So let's say you were able to find a property for $1 million.
Yeah.
You have the liquidity for the down payment, and you're looking to put in $150,000 in renovation. As a first-time investor, we could do that all day long. So, depending on where in the state the property is, that could very well be a luxury property. Now, what you want to consider as a first-time investor, is that the best decision for you to get into, right? Do you want to get into $1 million property on your very first project?
Yeah.
Now, if where you live, that is the common property value, very possible.
I think that's California, right?
I mean, if you live in Franklin or Brentwood.
Yeah, but even if you live in Franklin or Brentwood, a lot of times when we talk, we don't realize that a lot of people live in, other parts of the United States.
Sure.
What's the average home price outside of, these places? It's usually anywhere between $350,000 to $400,000, let's say, right? So for them, if we take those numbers, that's going to be the average investor out there. It's not that bad. They can potentially buy a house for $300,000, right?
Yep.
Put $30,000 into it and be able to sell it for $460,000. So that would be better, right?
100%.
In my opinion. Can you purchase $1 million house or $1 million investment as if it's your first, project?
You 100% can purchase or acquire $1 million property as a first-time investor.
How?
Right? So there are some caveats to that, and there's a few things you want to be mindful of. One, if it's going to be a fix and flip deal, the renovation budget cannot exceed 50% of the purchase price.
Which is what in this case?
Which would be $500,000 in this case.
All right.
Right? Now, with that said, as a first-time investor, I would recommend not getting anywhere higher on the renovation budget at 25 to 30% of that purchase price.
So would you say that 25 to 30% below that would be considered a light rehab?
That absolutely would be considered a light rehab project.
So in this scenario, at $1 million purchase, what would that mean? The rehab cost would be where?
So we'd be looking anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000.
$250,000. So that would be light rehab here, right?
Correct.
If it was a $100,000 property, it would be somewhere between $25,000 to $30,000.
Exactly.
Right?
So we're talking
percentage. Percentage,
yes.
Right. So now, after repair value, what we would call ARV, where would we have to be over here?
So for a first-time investor, we would need to be at 70% of the after completed value.
Okay.
Meaning our loan amount cannot exceed 70% of that final completed value.
Final completed value. Okay. That's great. That's fantastic. I think, if someone, now, do you recommend someone doing that, or do you recommend that somebody start with something smaller?
It really just depends on your current liquidity, right? If you just came into a ton of money or no, that wouldn't make sense. If you just came into a ton of money and you find a phenomenal deal that happens to be $1 million purchase, absolutely. Okay. I think that would be a great scenario considering all the numbers work out and there's profitability in the deal, right?
But it's also the market. Don't you agree? Right?
Absolutely.
It's the market. So if you're somewhere in California, then that could work because the average home price in California is $1 million. Yep. Right? It's a little bit shy of $1 million.
So you really wouldn't have much option.
Right. But also they have to understand that $1 million properties plus don't move as fast as affordable homes.
They do not.
Right.
Correct.
So they have to have that longevity in mind as well.
He just has to shit on my stuff. I'm just kidding.
I have to shit on it. You've been listening to The Game of Loans, where real estate battles are fought and won. Make sure to fortify your defenses by subscribing. Cash flow is coming, and we'll be back next time to help you claim your throne. The war of wealth continues.